Welcome back, and today we are talking storage. We're not talking moving, we're not talking boxes, we're not talking any of that. We are talking camera slash file storage, videos, photos. How do I do it? What is my workflow like? And how did I come to this workflow that I'm at now? So, right now, the most basic way of explaining my workflow is that I shoot on the R5, which is onto a CF Express card, which is just a super fast card so you can record 8K, 4K, 120, all those different insane video specs with different bit rates. And then I dump that onto an SSD. So right now I have an SSD and I have the Samsung T9. I also have used the T7. I have two of them, and it's actually kind of funny. I'll put a shot right here. I taped them together because I always have them together. One's a 2 terabyte, one's a 1 terabyte, and the 2 terabyte just came along because I kept filling up the 1 terabyte, but I liked using an SSD. But I always need them together. I always have files on for the same project interchangeably on each other. So that's why they're taped together. It's kind of funny, and it's kind of like become a little joke in my photographer friend group. And then once the project's done on the SSD, I transfer it onto one of the old reliables, the classics, the LaCie hard drives, the 4 terabyte, 5 terabyte. I think this one's 5. I started with the 4s, and then they just came out with the 5s within the last 2 years or so. So I use the 5s now. But those are my beasts for just storing. Those are pretty much just sitting on a shelf whenever I'm using them. And also if I have to send somebody footage, or if I have to deliver footage to somebody, I can take my LaCie over, give it to them, pick it up a couple days later, because I don't necessarily need them most of the time right away. One thing to be worried about there is that you should not trust those things to sit around for 15, 20 years. I'm going to have to figure something out for some of them eventually. But for right now, they're good for just storing for long term. So back to the very beginning, whenever I decided to get the CF Express card that I have now, that I record this podcast onto, that I record everything onto, I decided to go with the 256 gig. If you have an R5, I would definitely recommend getting at least a 256 gig card. I have filled it up before, not a lot. I was shooting a ton, but if you're shooting in 4K 120, you only get 15 minutes of video onto a 256 gig card. So you're going to need more than that depending on what style you are shooting. Now, 4K 24, which I am in now, I can record an hour and 50 minutes or something onto a 256 gig card. So that's plenty for me. And I haven't really run into too many problems with it. But I would definitely say if you don't get a 256 gig card, get two 128s. Now, that might sound counterintuitive, but it is nice sometimes to have two separate cards so you can be dumping one and also shooting simultaneously. The nice thing about the R5 is that it still does take an SD card, but be wary of that because if you have the SD card in, your camera does slow down and it doesn't work quite as well. I thought it was the weirdest thing whenever I threw an SD card in mine for the first time. It literally turns on slower. It records and then you gotta wait for it to buffer when you're done recording. It's super odd. I do not recommend using an SD card in a Canon R5. But once I'm done shooting, I then transfer it on to the SSD. Whenever I'm on the SSD, that is a super fast hard drive. It stands for solid state drive. Solid state drive pretty much just means that there's no mechanical things moving inside of the hard drive. For the LaCies, you can kind of hear them turn on and off. You can hear some sort of wheels turning inside of the hard drive. With the SSDs, there's something inside of it that all it is solid memory. It also works faster. It also just allows you to work faster off of it. For example, the T9 that I have is about 1 gig per second, which to edit off of is perfect. That's all I really need. I don't need faster than that. But the LaCies are, I want to say 90 megabits per second. Don't quote me on that. I think it's pretty close to that, but At the end of the day, the SSD is what you want to edit off of. There are faster SSDs, I think ranging all the way up to like 3 gigs per second. Actually, I think the internal SSD that is in the MacBook Pro is like 10 gigs a second. It's something insane like that. But if you're looking for an external one, which I would recommend, I would say don't store your files on your laptop. Why, you might ask? Well, the reason for that being, your laptop could shut down at really any moment. And I've had it happen to my friends before. Their computer just stops turning on, or one day they power it on and then there's just a folder with a question mark on it. Your laptop crashed. Your laptop, maybe you spill water on it and then it's toast. If you do that, then your files are totally gone. The likelihood of breaking an SSD is much lower than breaking your laptop. You use your laptop all the time, and it's not as tough as one of the SSDs. You could probably throw one of the SSDs off the top of a building, and it's going to be okay. Now, don't come to me if you tried throwing your SSD off the top of a building and it broke, but they are super tough. Especially there's LaCie ones, which are those 3 gig per second ones. Those ones are so tough, it's actually insane. They come with this padding around it, but it's around the entire SSD since it's a smaller drive. SSDs are more expensive, period. Also, CF Express cards are more expensive than SD cards. This is going to be one of the more annoying expenses that you have as you shoot more and as you work on more projects. Now, it's just not an exciting purchase to go out and purchase a new hard drive. It sucks. It's a couple $100. You got to do it every couple of months depending on how often you're shooting. But it's one of the things that you should buy. It's easy to kind of tiptoe around and get slower cards, to get crappier hard drives, but then you're going to end up having something break on you. You're going to end up having your camera slow down like I was mentioning, and that just sucks. Do not cut corners when it comes to memory. Now, the SSDs are going to be more money for less storage, which on the surface level sounds dumb. Why would I pay more money to have less space to store things on? It comes back to the speed. Like I mentioned before, having 1 gig per second versus, let's say, 0.1 gigs per second, it's a big difference. Whenever you're editing off of it, whenever you're trying to play back specific footage, especially as you get into the heavier footage, it's just going to work better if you have a faster drive. It's going to make everything easier. And also, the nice thing about it, if you have a nice card like the CF Express card that I have in my camera, and you're transferring from that to an SSD, it's going to transfer much faster than if you're transferring the same amount of footage from an SD card to one of the hard drives like a LaCie 5 terabyte. That's going to be much slower. That'll take 2 hours, but me transferring from my CF Express to my SSD, 100 gigs, realistically might take less than 5 minutes. That's crazy to think. It's crazy to think if you're coming from the background of using more of the 5 terabyte hard drives, using those popular 4 terabyte LaCie hard drives. But I definitely would say that you should get an SSD. At the end of the day, it's going to be one of the best purchases that you don't really notice until you don't have it. For example, today I was editing a project that I worked on about a year ago. Now, the project that I was working on, there were some updates that they wanted to make to it because we had to reshoot something. So I had to reopen that project. When I reopened it off of one of my LaCie hard drives, one of the slower ones. Now, I just did that because it was some quick changes and it was like 250 gigs that I didn't want to transfer onto my SSD. I was just going to work off of my old hard drive where it's been storing for a while. But whenever I did that, I noticed a serious difference. I noticed whenever I would save, it would take 10 seconds longer. Whenever I would go and eat lunch and then come back and work on it again, it took a little bit for the hard drive to kick back on. If I had to guess, I would say that's why the lifespan is shorter for these hard drives versus an SSD. I guess if you have the funds, you should just store everything on an SSD and keep it on there. For me, I'm not about to spend hundreds of dollars on less storage to not touch it again, potentially. Now, I don't delete footage. Whenever I'm done with the shoot, there's zero part of me that says, oh, let's just delete all of these files because the project's done. No, don't do that. Do not do that. Don't trust that. And you should even go one step further, and instead of only storing onto one of your larger hard drives, upload it to the cloud. We all have these cloud services where we send files to our clients. Pay a couple dollars extra a month so that you can have unlimited storage on one of those and upload your RAWs to the cloud. Just do it overnight. Do it when you're going to bed. You don't have to really do this all the time, but I definitely recommend backing up whenever you get the opportunity to do so. That's my workflow. Those are the cards that I use. That's just what I enjoy using the most on the day-to-day basis. That's what has made my life the easiest. So thank you for watching. Thanks for sticking around for a more technical one. If you're not a photographer here, we do other things as well. I don't even know if you've made it this far if you're not a photographer or care about file management. Anyways, have a great day. Peace out. See you soon. Goodbye.